Okay. All right, folks, I guess we're live, maybe. Welcome to the Busy Farms live stream about the history of agriculture in Clark County. Part one, of course. By the way, I'm Joe Zimmerman. I'm here with my dad, Bill.
Hello.
Yep.
Yep.
And we're just gonna, if you guys don't mind, we're gonna just carry on the way I see it is a friendly conversation between the two of us and allow you guys to, shall we say, look over our shoulders, to eavesdrop on our conversation, shall we say. And just here, we're going to kind of walk through the history of ag in Clark County, kind of decade by decade, and then hit on some key points about, kind of this idea of where did ag go? What happened to it? Why did it go away? Kind of, sort of, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
By the way, and I don't want to give away the punchline too quick here, but there's going to be three parts to this. Part one today, we're going to go through the background history of ag, and then leading up to the first of three issues. There were essentially three issues that hit Clark County pretty hard in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And those three issues were the beef price freeze that happened in the 1970s. Okay.
People may not be aware of what happened with Nixon. Yep.
That led to that then led into the farm crisis of the 1980s. Mm-hmm. And that destroyed not just a lot of farms in Clark County, but a lot of farms across the United States, of course.
Yeah.
And then, of course...
Small farms.
Oh, yes.
The small farms, yeah.
In particular...
Family farms, yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, when people say, kind of, where did all the family farms go? Well, the farm crisis, that really was it, wasn't it? Yeah. And then, of course, here in Clark County, we were really hard hit when we got into the 1990s with something called the dairy buyout program. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, today is part one, up to the beef price freeze. We will spend all of part two talking about the farm crisis, which, my God, that could be a 4-hour session right there, could it not?
Yeah.
And then, of course, we
won't try and spend 4 hours.
No, we won't.
We're not going to do
hours.
that.
Yeah.
No.
But then, of course, the dairy buyout program, which I know you had said at one time there was 150 dairies in Clark County.
Originally, yeah. Way back and everything.
Right.
But so many of them were small. But anyhow, we can get into that later.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start with this, Dad. Let's start with let's start out. Let's call it just after the Civil War. Back when you were a child.
No. No, we were talking about that. I actually ended up having breakfast with my sister and brother that are here in the area and stuff. We got talking about the Goddards. That's one side of our family is the Goddards and stuff. They came out here right in the 1860s. A couple of reasons. Number one was free land, but then also was to avoid the Civil War.
Yeah, to avoid the Civil War. Yes.
They were out of Kentucky and migrated into Iowa, but they still had southern roots, and or a lot of the others had southern roots, and they wanted to get away from it. Yeah.
Right.
So
pacifists, if you will.
And a lot of the agriculture here didn't start until primarily the agriculture that was here in the 1860s was primarily all more or less subsistence farming.
Yeah.
If you can imagine, this area was covered in timber, it was covered in trees, mm-hmm. and there was not that much open land, and so very limited as far as cultivation went, and mostly, if anything, that was pasturing cattle.
Yeah.
So for the early term, yeah.
Right. And in fact, I'd love to point out, speaking of early history of Clark County, everybody knows that we have a major road out here called Fourth Plain Road.
Well, Fourth Plain, Mill Plain, Fifth Plain.
Yeah. Is the reason that those were called that was because there were a number of, I don't want to say open areas or non-timbered areas, and that was...
Or lightly timbered, yeah.
Lightly timbered. It wasn't just Fourth Plain. It was First Plain, Second Plain, Third Plain. Now, God, I'd love to find out where those used to be.
Yeah, where they used to be, yeah.
But, and then, of course, Mill Plain, yeah.
And then, of course, we have, where we are close to is Brush Prairie, and it was named that because it was just a brushy prairie, area, and it wasn't as big as people think it was. It was,
right.
For the most part, any of the upper land here in Clark County was into big timber.
Right.
and stuff. So
it was when you got down to the bottoms that they
right. So on our farm here, they farmed when they settled it. They farmed just the bottom land, or well, and they really didn't even farm it. They ranged cattle on it,
right,
and one thing or another down by towards Curtin Creek,
right,
and stuff. And so that was, there was less trees, more open space. They could have some pasture, and stuff. But they really never started farming much of it until much later on. It took a tremendous amount to clear that land. If you can imagine, at that time they didn't have cats, they didn't have anything. They had horses, and they had a shovel and an axe
and dynamite.
Well, now, okay, but that dynamite came later.
Right,
so
that is true.
That's
true.
Another story. So I don't know if the people want to hear about it, but anyhow, so really, realistically, at our farm, a lot of it did not get cleared until after World War II. And after World War II, blasting powder became available from the war effort. And here in our local area, there was 3 different farms went together and bought 5 rail car loads of dynamite. And at one time down here at Holman Crossing, there was 5 rail cars. And so a little interesting side note is you paid $8 a ton for the dynamite, but you didn't buy it. You bought it by the ton, but you bought it in a quantity of 20 tons at a time because that was a rail car load. And so our family bought 2 rail car loads of dynamite, if you can imagine. So, yeah.
I've got to interject that, recently I've been involved in some groups that are very concerned with what may or may not happen with the Salachi Prairie Railroad over here. And I've actually in private conversations mentioned to them, boy, you want to talk about having an issue with the rail line, boy, do we have a story about that. And I told them about having 5 rail cars of dynamite sitting here just south of our farm on the rail line. And they were like, you say what? What did you do? And we're like, oh yeah, it was just a thing,
Well, nobody worried about going and blowing up the city hall or anything else.
Right.
And stuff. But anyhow, So so once that became available, they were able to open up a lot more land here in our local area here. And stuff. But even as a child, when I was a small boy, we still had 20 acres that we referred to it as the stump pasture, meaning that the timber had been cut off it, the stumps were remaining, and we pastured cattle in around the stumps and everything. Yeah.
Back when you were a small boy, just after the Civil War, huh?
No. And anyhow, we actually that stayed there until after Peggy and I were married, and we got a guy in to come in with a cat and a stump splitter. And we cleared it. We finished clearing it in the 1970s here.
Right. By the way, this is actually a good little segue into something. I'm going to bring up a topic, and I don't want to sound as though we're denigrating that topic, but the topic is commodity agriculture. Okay. And what you were saying, the farming here was primarily subsistence farming. Okay.
For a long time, and I don't know when it kind of made the changeover. You get around Ridgefield, you get into the spuds in Ridgefield, and one thing another.
Well, and I think that the argument could be made that we didn't truly get into subsistence farming here in Clark County until the timber started to be cleared in large quantities.
Well, you're talking commodity farming.
Right. To get into commodity farming. Now, I told you I had a trick, well, not a trick question. It's more of a rhetorical question, and just something that popped in my mind here the other day. I'm going to hit you with it live on the air. Okay,
all right.
Could it be said that the Civil War was fought over commodity agriculture?
Well, in some ways it was. The South controlled the cotton and tobacco.
And corn,
a lot of corn and stuff.
Yeah.
It was somewhat.
Right.
It was in some ways over commodity agriculture because those commodities, cotton, tobacco, and everything, relied on so much slave labor to be able to be viable.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You bet. It had to be with that.
Right.
If you took away that, you went. Let's say if you were talking ranching, they didn't need the slave labor for that. Yeah.
Right. And in fact, again, another segue. Okay, now let's take a serious look at that period. Let's call it 1870 through about 1900. Okay. Obviously, you said here in Clark County, it was just primarily subsistence farming. One of the things I do want to point out, because somebody made us watch way too many Western movies growing up. you know, the movement to the west is primarily for animal agriculture, whether that was cattle in Texas and Oklahoma, or there was a lot of sheeping, sheep farming up in Montana and the like.
Well, eastern Washington too. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course they say, the history books say, that a lot of that has to do with the advent of the refrigerated rail car, and that really pushed the American West to be settled, if you will, because then they could take the drive the cattle to the railhead, I should say, and then take it into Chicago to be, slaughtered, cut, and distributed.
Well, I think more than anything, it moved that the slaughtering facilities moved out west more. True. because they always had been taken and doing that, but some of the slaughter facilities moved out west, because then they could slaughter and refrigerate and ship it back to east. Chicago and on past, and you started seeing the decline of the Chicago stockyards.
That's true.
And everything because of that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that takes us up to about 1900, let's say. So let's start going, shall we say, approximately decade by decade, coming on from then.
You expecting an awful lot of me. I don't know. I wasn't around at that time, but anyhow, I've heard a lot of stories from my family and one thing and another, what was available and stuff. Yeah.
So of course, 1900 to 1910, there's not a whole lot of difference, although I'm going to take a guess that we started seeing some land being cleared, things like that.
But of course, part of it was too, like for instance, you saw agriculture out in the areas like Bachelor Island, where it was there were no trees at all anyhow, and it flooded over in the wintertime and one thing and another, but it very fertile soil, and so that's where the spuds were. The Ridgefield Spudders get their name and everything because of the Zimmerleys and everything out there in Ridgefield. And
I do have to interject. Everybody asks if we're related to the Zimmerleys, and we're like, no, our name is Zimmerman.
Yeah.
No relation, but anyhow.
So I think they're both still good German names, but
Yes.
But you saw agriculture, or let's say cultivation.
Yes.
Starting to show up in, like, for instance, the Burnt Bridge Creek bottoms.
Yes.
You started seeing it in the Hawkinson area there by China Ditch.
Yes.
Where, and of course, China Ditch was in 1900 or around there.
Yeah.
And then we started seeing it here with Curtin Creek area and everything. But it was the bottoms that they needed fertile soil.
Yes.
Okay. People don't realize that a lot of they didn't have commercial fertilizers at that time, so they had to rely upon high organic soils to be fertile enough to produce a good crop.
Right.
And
in fact, if we're going to talk that 1900 to 1910 period, then we should definitely point out, especially for those folks that have just recently moved to the area, it's very important to know that. Okay, when we talk China Ditch, that's 172nd Avenue.
Yep.
From Ward Road north to, what does it run up to?
To Hawkinson, 159th Street.
159th Street, right?
Yep.
And that was dug by a crew of hundreds of...
I don't know how many hundred Chinese came in to do that.
Yes. Chinese
and then when they were done with China Ditch, they came down here to Curtin Creek and dug the ditch here at Curtin Creek.
Yeah. And again, for those who don't know, Curtin Creek is it looks like a creek. It's actually a man-made drainage canal that runs approximately from
78th Street down to Salmon Creek. At 139th Street.
And it's just west of our farm here.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyhow, and so there were a couple of major drainage projects that came about that time, trying to create more fertile land.
Yeah.
And beyond fertile land, but. It is a bit wet today, is it not? So, they're trying to dry it out a bit.
Well, that was it. Both of those areas, China Ditch and Curtin Creek area, were all just a swamp.
Yeah.
And stuff. And in fact, old timers talked about, that I talked to, talked that 159th Street that goes from Brush Prairie east to Hawkinson, that in the wintertime, oftentimes it was impassable.
It really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so you had to go around that area that it wasn't always. It was, maybe it would be impassable for 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, it would flood up that deep. Yeah.
Okay.
Now keep in mind, we're not talking cars at that time. No, we're talking horses and buggies, and it still was impassable.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump now from 1910 to 1920, roughly. Now, I did a little research on my own here, and of course, about that time, we started seeing the advent of the prune industry here in Clark County.
Prune Hill and all that. Yeah.
And there was there's a period in time where they considered that Clark County may just become the prune capital of the United States.
Yeah.
And of course, again, for those who have just recently moved to the area here, orchards. Why is it called orchards? Well, that was where orchard, it was a huge...
The prune orchards.
And
everything else, When I was a small boy, I can still remember going to various places and the prune dryers were still there.
Yeah.
And they've long since gone and been destroyed and stuff. But there was occasionally you would run into a prune dryer.
Yeah. Which is, by the way, it's just a big, correct me if I'm wrong, just a big building that would warm up to a low humidity?
I do not know. Okay. I take that. They were prune dryers.
Okay.
They were told to me they were prune dryers.
Yeah.
I was such a small boy that I was just amazed at, wow, this huge building.
Oh, really?
And stuff. Yeah.
So other than the fact that you stood outside and went, wow, building.
Yeah.
What was inside? How did it work?
I remember is we went to look at a guy's tractor one time, and he had a John Deere tractor sitting in the prune dryer. That's a big deal. Yeah.
We don't drive John Deeres on our farm.
Not anymore. No.
Okay.
No.
Anyway, by the way, there's nothing wrong with John Deeres. We just have fun teasing people that own them about their pretty green things.
We've had a couple of John Deeres.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
but the prune industry was big, and you and I talked a little bit about it. What caused the collapse of the prune industry? I even asked my brother and sister today, and none of us can really put a finger on it, other than possibly the changing diet of the nation. Yeah.
And the little bit of research I did came down to this: is they said, the prune industry was a bit of a fad. Please, I don't pretend to think that this is the correct answer to this. But they said it's kind of almost went like a presidential administration. Is kind of like, so someone said that it was the new superfood, if you will, and that you'll live forever if you change your diet to prunes.
About like Kellogg's cornflakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Anyhow, it was a bit of a fad. It was a bit of a superfood. It was a bit of a this is the new diet trend, if you will.
But along about that time too, though, I think we have to make sure we understand too. The population of Clark County was increasing, and you started seeing the dairy industry come up. And stuff. Also the chicken industry.
Oh yes.
And so our family was involved with chickens. We had Zimmerman's hatchery here.
Yes.
But there was a number of hatcheries throughout Clark County. And to me, it's just mind-boggling the number we do, and yet there was all these other hatcheries that were doing chickens also.
Right.
And when I was, not even when I was a small boy, but as a young adult, is a lot of the farms you would go to here, you would look and you go, if you know the architecture, you look at it and you go, okay, that was a chicken house. And a lot of the places would raise up 500 to 1,000 birds. And I don't know if they were all for layers or for meat birds or what.
Right.
But anyhow, you saw a lot of that and everything.
And by the way, taking this back and tying it again to commodity agriculture, one of the things to know is that and you and I spoke about this yesterday, is that you would have a farm, and this was through the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you would have a farm that would be, they would specialize in something. For instance, our farm specialized in hatching chicks, okay? But they would have a specialty, but they would also have general agriculture, this idea that you had chicks and you did, you milked cows and you raised beef cows and you had hogs and you did this and you did that.
You did a little bit of everything,
A little of everything. And of course, what I'm getting at, of course, is the idea of this duoculture, this idea of back in the Midwest where you have corn and soybean farmers, and you ask them, what else do you farm? And they go, corn and soybeans. That's
corn and soybeans, that's it. And we could get into that, talking about the beef price freeze and the farm crisis. That changed
Right.
That morphed that and everything. Okay,
Right.
all right.
Okay,
But
so
back to Clark County.
Back to Clark County. Okay, 1920 to 1930. Of course, now we've got the fun. Yeah, we're just touching into the depression.
Depression. Yeah.
Depression. Now, I have to say, do we know anything at all about how the Depression really hit Clark County specifically? And now it hit the entire United States, but it hit Clark County differently, specifically about agriculture?
I don't know. I will say this. Ironically, our family built a lot of the chicken houses and the chicken development or the chicken business,
the operation
during the Depression.
Yes.
And when I asked years ago about it, they said, "Well, here was the deal: was that our family had enough cash
Yes.
that when the Depression hit and they wanted to build chicken houses, they could build them so cheap."
Yes.
Because an ordinary day laborer was 50 cents a day.
Right.
Or maybe it was $1 a day.
Yeah.
A brick mason was 50 cents an hour.
Right.
And so these chicken houses are all block buildings and they're, they're laid up block and that's it. So
There's a guy I watch I come across his short videos on Facebook all the time, and it's funny. His dad was extremely, very old. He's a guy my age, but his dad was much older when he had children,
right.
And so he remembers the Depression, and he goes, "Dad, what was the Depression like?" He goes, "Well," and he just goes, "Oh, the Depression was nothing." And he goes, "What do you mean it was nothing?" He goes, "Well, nobody had any money," or he says, words. He goes, "We didn't have any money, but heck, nobody had any money."
So, a good friend of mine that I went to work for Homer Mosier for years there and stuff, a number of years. And Homer, we would sit at lunch and talk. And Homer would say, is that, he says the Depression was bad. But he says, as long as you got a job and you held a job, he says, things were cheap.
Yeah.
He says, a package of T-shirts was 19 cents.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, so you're getting paid $1 a day.
Yeah.
He says, well, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
If you had a job.
Yes.
And that was the whole struggle with and everything.
Right.
And but Clark County here, I don't know if it bothered as much.
Right.
I know that a lot of the farm programs that Roosevelt came up with were back to your commodity farms. Okay, now we were very, very diversified here in Clark County.
Yes.
And I don't know, yes, we grew wheat. Yep. We didn't grow much corn.
Right.
Because this is not a country that grows corn good.
Right.
And stuff. But we grew wheat, grains, barley, oats, all that stuff. A lot of pasture. So we had a lot of the dairies. And I don't know when the dairy industry in Clark County really pushed. But so many of the places did dairy cattle.
Yeah.
Now, okay, folks, everybody has to remember, there was no electricity.
Right.
All the dairy cattle had to be milked by hand.
Yes.
Or you had a generator.
Right.
And you could do something that way.
Right.
But like here, I didn't realize, my dad was telling me later in life and everything, we had 21 head.
Yeah.
And they milked, Dad milked 10 in the morning and 11 at night, and his dad milked, vice versa and
11
stuff.
in the morning, 10 at night, yeah.
Now, okay, I milked a couple of cows when I was in high school and everything. We always had a couple of dairy cows.
Of course.
And I'm sitting there going, holy cow, I can't imagine.
And you still like your warm milk on
cereal. Gosh, if I have cornflakes, I got to have warm milk and everything. So anyhow, it may sound crazy, folks, but that's what I grew up with, was fresh cow's milk, and it's got to be warm. Anyhow, but getting back to it, was that now all of the milk was handled in cans and stuff. And a neighbor of ours talked about one of his first jobs was handling cans and going to the various farms, and they would have a rack out at the road, and you would take and pull, if they had 3 cans of milk, and you'd pull those off, and you'd put 3 empty cans out, and one thing another.
I've got to interject that for folks, for those that don't know, you'll see, for instance, around here, there's a company called Milky Way that is the milk pickup truck. And now the hardest they work is they just have to connect a hose.
And turn the pump on.
Yeah, connect a hose and then just pump the milk into the truck. They don't lift any cans.
Yeah.
And of course, they're picking up literally thousands of gallons of milk every day.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe even 10,000 gallons of milk a day.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah. So now here's one thing I got thinking about the other day is that, as hard as I work to milk 2 cows, and I'm sitting there going, how many hours did it take to milk 10? Mm-hmm. Okay, so then I turned it around and go, but hold on a minute. The cattle they had back then were not the Holsteins we have today.
Right.
And they may have looked more like an Angus.
Yeah.
With a little udder that puts out, about, probably, a gallon of milk. And you're lucky if you get that much.
Right.
And
in fact, so what my dad is getting at, of course, is there have been extreme advances in for instance, cattle genetics.
Oh yeah.
And I'll say this is that there's time. Okay, I'll even go so far as to say, as farmers, sometimes we even have our feelings hurt a bit by kind of this attitude that, well, you guys are just dumb farmers. And we're going, do you guys realize the amount of technology and research and advancements, whether we're talking technological advancements, the farmers that are now using things like, don't even start with AI, but, precision agriculture and what that involves, or and then the genetic research that goes into cattle production, or how about this is the dietary research. Folks, if you've seen a dairy, a 21st century dairy, those cows have a diet that is designed by a dietitian more than any bodybuilder.
Almost more than the hospitals have for dietitians.
Yeah. Right.
So years ago, is everybody that was anybody that was feeding had a book called Morrison's Feed and Feeding.
Okay, got it.
And I have one up in the house and everything too. And that was they covered hogs. I was raising hogs, and so they covered hogs and so go through to how much bone meal do you need, how much calcium do you need in there and everything and stuff.
The unfortunate part is the copyright was 1955, but
it didn't matter. They still So So the dairy industry started to grow here, and I'm blown away because I didn't realize, talking to different people, how many people were, other farms that, when I grew up in the 70s, they had transitioned to being just pretty well strictly a crop farm.
Right.
But they had started out with milking 10 head or 15 head or 8 head or whatever, and none. Well, I take that back. I won't say that none of them were very large. When you got down in the Lower River Road area, and one thing and another, and some of that stuff, you got into some that were larger operations and stuff. But keep in mind, everything was hand milked.
Hand milked.
Sanitation wise, we laugh about it, and today we have the pipeline milkers, and we have they go through a very critical washing process to make sure the udder is clean and don't transmit. They go through the cell counts and they go through the stuff. When we were milking, sometimes, even though we tried to thoroughly wash the animals off, you'd still be milking, and sometimes you're going, wow, there's almost more dirt and manure coming down the teats than there is milk coming in.
I apologize. I've heard stories about, you just flick that little piece out of the milk, and then we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
We're good. Keep going. Yeah.
But anyhow, okay. So getting back into it is farming in Clark County in the 30s and the 40s was primarily the chickens and the milk industry. Ironically, I got into okay.
We've got 30 minutes left. If we're going to make it in a
okay. All right, that's what
that was that. Okay.
Sorry, folks. We got
our director.
Anyhow, so I started raising hogs. I don't know why hogs appealed to me.
Yeah.
And one thing and another. Ironically, hogs here was nothing. When I went to the county fair the first time, there was 3 of us with hogs.
Really?
There was
Wow.
3.
Yeah.
And now you go to the county fair and you go, wow, there's 30,
Right.
25 or 30,
Right.
and stuff.
Which is funny, because the reality is, back in the 70s, hogs paid. Well, they set you up ready to farm. I'll tell you, I know that much.
Yeah.
And yet today, I can't say today. Let's go back to the 1990s and early 2000s. Hogs were in the toilet, and so why did we have?
They hit real bad.
Yeah.
Right around the year 2000, they hit real bad.
Yeah.
But I'll say this: as I got into raising hogs, I raised wiener pigs, and I sold wiener pigs. And I'm telling you, folks, I made so much money. I was in high school at the time.
Yeah.
I made so much money raising wiener pigs that I never wanted to tell my friends how much money I had in the bank.
Yeah.
In fact, I was denied state farmer degree because.
And this is through FFA, by the way.
Through FFA.
Yeah.
And my ag teacher sent a note to him or called him, I don't know which, and said, why did my application not go through?
Yeah.
And they said, because I had too much money in the bank
Yes.
and stuff, and they really felt I should.
Congratulations.
Now,
You were too successful.
yeah, and keep in mind now, we'll jump into something a little later on. The next jump is into Earl Butts, and that we should go into debt heavily and go to
And we'll cover that in part 2, by the way, just to let everybody know.
Well, we'll kind of hit on it at
hit
the
it
end of
here,
this
yeah.
here, yeah. But anyhow,
Okay. By the way, lightning round here. I did want to say just a little bit about the, shall we say, the Dust Bowl. That was coming out of the Depression era, 1930s. Now, obviously, here, not known for dust.
Right.
Okay. But I was sleeping on this here sleeping on an idea, or trying to go to sleep, and had an idea. Okay. There's a lot of folks, I've heard a lot of folks in the past that kind of had an attitude that the Dust Bowl was because of farmers doing bad practices over and over again. Now, let me ask you a question. Number one, you and I know this, is that as terrible as it may sound, that a lot of the Dust Bowl was caused because we had not yet started to use good herbicides.
Well, and good tillage practices.
And tillage practices.
Yes, we still moldboard plowed.
Yep.
But here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize and don't understand.
Yeah.
We did not have any herbicides available.
Yeah.
The only thing herbicide we had available was a tillage.
Yeah, which was a tillage tool. Yeah,
Tillage tool.
And
So
consequently, they just tilled over and over and over again, and of course that kind of made the Dust Bowl. Yeah.
So since then, we've done a lot more research and we understand so much better. Every time we till, we destroy organic matter in the soil.
Yeah.
We know that. Well, okay, let's take, for instance, corn.
Yeah.
You plant, in those days, you planted check row corn.
Yeah.
And so you planted 3 foot by 3 foot every direction. So when you wanted to clean up and take out the weeds, you'd cultivate this way. Then the next time you'd cultivate this way.
Yeah.
Then you'd cultivate it a 45.
Diagonally.
So
yes.
you probably would cultivate that field over 4 times or maybe more to try and control the weeds to have a good crop. Well, guess what? We didn't realize what we were doing until much later on.
Right.
And actually, we never really realized until we got into the no-till system.
Right.
And started to realize what was happening.
Right.
And stuff. And don't take it, and Andrew Young was the father of no-till.
Oh, was he? Okay.
And he was not a university person or anything. Really? He was a guy that sat in a fence row and said, why is this soil so much better than that soil?
Really?
And stuff. And so he started in the 1970s.
Okay.
And everything. Okay, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves.
Now,
okay.
do you want to throw this? Okay, again, having to do with the Dust Bowl. Okay, there's another variable there, and that is, okay, we hear, again, we did not see it here, but in the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma, where the
Kansas,
Dust Bowl
yeah.
was, Kansas, there was an awful lot of tenant farmers. Okay, there was an awful lot of sharecrop farmers. Okay. Now, you and I, we've met a lot of farmers, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of farmland owners. How many of those tenant farmers and sharecroppers were told, you are farming my land, you will farm cotton?
That, yeah.
Or instead of going, listen, I think I have a better, and let's just say, maybe it's sorghum. I don't know. I just
Right.
like that. And you go, and that farm owner, the guy that owned the land, goes, no, damn it, we have always raised cotton, you will raise cotton.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know where you're headed with that, but yes,
I don't know where I'm headed with things either.
Yeah. No, you're right, is that, you were bound by what that man wanted you to do.
Yeah.
And stuff. Yeah.
And so, and keep in mind, let's speculate that this is some 80-year-old guy that would put him as having grown up just after the Civil War.
Yeah.
And you go, God dang it, I am now bound to do his practices, and there you go. Yeah.
And it is ironic on the Dust Bowl that I saw a deal or an article here. It's been probably, I forget, 10 or 12 years ago, where they were saying that ironically at that time, that back in the 2010 or whatever, they had a period there where the rainfall was even lower than the Dust Bowl.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But we didn't have the blowing.
Right.
Because
the dust blowing, that is. Yeah.
The dust blowing.
Yeah.
Because we understood how to
maintain high soil organic matter.
Yeah, well, and to leave cover on the ground.
Yeah.
Rather than moldboard plowing, they would no-till.
Yep.
They would strip till or whatever, but most of the ground was covered.
Yes.
And lo and behold, we didn't have the problem with blowing.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
So now let's go. Now here's the fun one. Let's get into shall we say the Warriors, the 30s through the 40s, or 30s and 40s.
Yeah, the 40s. The 40s. Yeah.
Anything major to say about that? Although I will throw out, again, in my research about the prune orchards around here, I heard that, number one, the thing that made it go away was the change in the American diet. And then the other thing was that so many men left for the war effort that they're really, they lost all of their manpower to harvest prunes and then run the prune dryers.
Probably very much so. And that could be a major part of it. But I don't know what exactly caused it, but
so go ahead.
The war effort, all of a sudden, everything was money.
Yes.
We tell the story about that on my wife's side of the family. Her family settled in Nabton, Bickleton area, the Horseheaven Hills of eastern Washington. And when the Depression hit, Grandpa Harry talked about, and he talked to me. He was fascinating man. Well, he was fascinating story.
Born in 1880
in Illinois,
and then died in 1980. He was 100 years old when he died.
Yeah.
And so this was in his 30s and 40s. He was farming in eastern Washington.
Right. Yeah. So anyhow, he was telling me that during the Depression, you would buy everything was sacked. All the wheat, barley, everything was sacked, and there was no bulk.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would buy a sack. The sack would cost you 17 cents. Okay. You filled it with wheat. Took it down to Roosevelt to the elevator, and you got 12 cents. So you got less money for it with wheat in it than you did if you
for the sack.
For the sack.
Did you get the sack back?
No, the sack had to go with the wheat and stuff. But you had to buy more sacks the next year. Yeah. So math didn't take long, and it really was not your friend.
Right.
So the tribes, Peggy's family, had enough money that they could pack up and they could drive themselves to Vancouver and settle in Vancouver and get away from there was nothing on over there. On the other hand is the Harry's oldest daughter married into the Williams family that was farming there. They were so poor, they used to say they were so poor they did not have money enough to buy gas to get down and everything.
Yeah.
So they basically became squatters.
Yeah.
The bank had taken their farm. Yeah. Basically, they just squatted on a farm or whatever and did what they could, grew a garden and did what they could to try and survive.
Right.
When the war came around, then all of a sudden commodity prices jumped.
Yes.
Well, and the banks were in such a position, they wanted to get rid of those farms.
Yes.
And do something with them.
The farms that they had taken over in the
the Williamses were sitting there going, well, gee whiz, okay, well, here's this farm here. Would you like this farm? And they go, okay, so they bought it, And then the next year it was kind of, well, you did so well, would you like to buy this farm? And so they ended up being very large landowners over in...
Which is ironic to go from being, squatters, just barely subsiding, barely surviving,
right,
to being one of the largest farms over in those...
In the Mapton
area. Yeah.
And so, so it was quite a surprising, how would you say, a jump to go from so low on commodity prices or so low on anything prices, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, we need all of this and everything.
And in fact, we have a funny story. There was so my mom's maiden name is Tribe, of course. Our name, of course, Zimmerman's. And the Tribes and Zimmermans, it wasn't that there was any dislike between them, but there was always talk about, well, you guys, especially in the war era, you guys did better. The Zimmermans did better. We had fuel coupons, didn't we? Fuel rationing.
Yeah, we never had troubles with fuel.
Because we were farmers.
We were producing food.
We were farmers, and so farmers got fuel. If you lived in town, you didn't get fuel, did you?
Right. You only got a certain amount.
And of course that led to the rationing and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. The war years were very there was a lot of fraud. There was a lot of things that went on that were kind of like, we don't know about and stuff. But
I do have to back up, by the way. Just let's go a little bit before the war years. I never realized Washington State was actually a very we've always called ourselves a progressive state. We were an early adopter of
prohibition.
Okay.
Well, I wasn't going to hit on prohibition because that's not really much agriculture.
I know, right? However, here in Clark County, we did have an instance. We had a deputy shot and killed, searching for an illegal still out in the woods.
Yeah. And that was, sadly enough, that was one of the few deals. Yeah.
And there may have been a little liquor produced on the Zimmerman farm during that time.
We had a canner that was downstairs that we always canned in.
Grandma's copper kettle. Yeah.
Big copper kettle. And I wow, this is really amazing to have this big, huge copper kettle and everything. And Dad goes, well, that was the still.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So anyhow,
Anyway, so let's again the World War II era, the jump in commodity prices. I don't want to say the farmers were just overnight we were rich, but all of a sudden we're doing. Farmers are doing well.
Yeah.
Now I do know. I know this historically is that here in Clark County we had a number of food processing operations. For instance, beans. We had bean processors.
Well, we had down on Lower River Road, or not Lower River Road, Fruit Valley area. Right. There was 5. When I was young, there was 5 food processors still down there. Yeah. Del Monte and one thing another else and stuff. Yeah. And all that they finally started going out. But that was later on. So let's
well, and it makes me wonder. I'm going to take a wild guess here. I don't know. Don't imagine that it's incorrect. Is a lot of those came about during the war era because we were looking to package all that food for the troops overseas.
They packaged a lot of food.
Whether the C rats and K rats and anyhow.
Mm-hmm. So anyhow,
and then of course all the folks moved. Sorry to interject. A huge westward movement of folks coming to Vancouver to build Liberty ships.
Ships and other stuff with Clark County. The influx of people and
oh my
stuff.
God! And in fact, I would say that it goes without saying that World War II was what made Vancouver. I'm sure it was just it was a cow town until World War II hit.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much, but definitely the shipyards down there and stuff definitely did. Yeah. Now I know that even I talked to Homer and Homer farmed, but he farmed on the he worked in the shipyards and farmed on the side and stuff. So he did like I did for some is worked till midnight and then got up and went to work and everything and stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so and by the way, so after World War II, we do have the 50s and 60s. I would go out on a limb to say that there really wasn't much change between the 40s led into the 50s and 60s. Commodity prices, of course, fluctuated, but as a rule, farmers, I can't say that farmers were rich, but farmers did well. Would you say?
They did well.
Yeah.
And let me back up. I want to tell one story about World War II.
Yes.
Is everything was controlled.
Yes.
Joe touched on it that, you know, we had fuel, but there was also sugar rationing.
Yes.
There was meat rationing and stuff. So I want to tell two stories, okay? Number one is
Clarence McKay?
okay, I will tell about Clarence McKay.
Okay, got it.
But anyhow, I'll get there yet.
Okay.
Is Homer talked about that he was raising chickens and raising a lot of layer hens.
Yes.
But when they got old, you sold them out for stewing hens.
Yeah.
Well, you were supposed to take them to the processor.
Yes.
The processor that had the contract.
Yes.
And Homer got sick and tired of getting so little for him that he went to work and took them across the river over to Portland.
Right.
He pulled into a subdivision area in Portland and then started in from the back of his truck. He took 1,000 birds over and took and started in hawking that, hey, I have chickens for sale. I have chickens for sale, $1 a piece.
$1 a piece.
$1 a piece, not 25 cents that he was going to get at the processor, but
$1
$1.
Yep.
And that,
and of course silently saying no coupons needed.
no coupons needed, nothing.
Yep.
And he said in 2 hours he sold all 1,000 birds.
Right.
And he goes, wow. He says, here I am. I'm coming home with $1,000
Yep.
instead of coming home with 250.
Which, by the way, was technically illegal.
Illegal, but
Right.
a lot of people were having to try and do what they could.
Right.
So that leads us into another story. Is that up here in Brush Prairie, there's a store, and when I was a boy, Dixon's. Everybody knew the Dixon store.
Well, in fact, if you drive through Brush Prairie and you just look for the store that looks like an old general store,
yeah,
that's
it's still there. Yeah,
that's Dixon's.
and stuff. And anyhow, in the back, Harry Dixon was known to be cutting meat.
Yes.
Now there was very tight restrictions. You had to have coupons to buy meat.
Yes.
To buy red meat,
Yes.
especially.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyhow, Harry, everybody knew in the area that Harry was cutting meat in the back of the store.
Yes.
Well, so along comes the sheriff,
Yep.
Clarence McKay. He was a good, a
was a local
neighborhood
boy.
local guy,
Yep.
and everything, and stuff.
I hear
Liked and everything.
Everybody loved him. Yes.
Yeah. Anyhow, so Clarence McKay came and he started asking some real.
Correct me if I'm wrong. He showed up in his cop car in uniform.
I don't know. I don't
That's
know.
the way I was heard.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Anyhow, could be, which I wouldn't doubt.
Yeah.
Anyhow, started asking some very pointed questions to Harry Dixon about buying meat without stamps. And so they bantered back and forth a little bit and one thing another. And so they finally came down to it, and Harry Dixon told Clarence McKay, so the story goes, is told Clarence McKay that, listen, I wouldn't want to do anything illegal, and it's illegal to sell meat without stamps.
Yes,
and I wouldn't want to do anything that way.
illegal. Yes.
And Clarence McKay, supposedly the story goes, says, listen, damn it, I'm out of meat, I'm out of stamps, and my kids are hungry.
Yeah.
Will you sell me some meat? So anyhow, it was it wasn't all times of great. And even a lot of the people that worked in the shipyards talked about that. Gee, that was great. They were getting paid great money.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, you had no place to spend it.
Yeah. You couldn't spend it on anything. You couldn't buy meat.
You couldn't. You didn't have gas to go anywhere for it and stuff. So anyhow,
Sure.
but like you said on the farms here, we had all kinds of gas.
Yeah.
It was just. It wasn't that they threw gas at you.
No,
it was just that if you needed 400 gallons, you got 400 gallons.
Yeah, because you were making food.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, sorry, this leads into something very important. Okay, what year was it? I know this was a bit of your trivia that you've always had for us. What year was it that the number switched from the number of farms that farm predominantly with horses or horses or animals to tractors?
Okay, no, what it is when did the number of tractors in the United States exceed the number of horses?
There you go. Okay, there you go.
And
there
stuff.
You go.
And people don't realize that they were farming with horses clear, 1955.
It was 1955, yes.
That they finally, ironically, as we were watching a program the other day, talking some, and they were cultivating corn with horses.
Oh, of course.
And they were saying is that for a lot of the South especially,
yes,
they considered that you didn't cultivate with a tractor. You cultivated with a horse. You cultivated cotton and you cultivated tobacco with a horse.
Yeah. And okay, the reason for us as farmers that is very pointed, or very important to know, is that the number I've always heard is that if you're going to farm with animals, a full 1/3 of your production is going to do nothing but feed those animals.
And that was one of the things that, it's funny, is I watched a program on Fordson the other day.
Say, okay, who now is saying that farmers should go back to farming with
Well,
horses?
I don't know about that, but they were, in World War I, Britain was asking desperately for somebody to produce a small tractor for them.
Yes.
And then that was Henry Ford. Henry Ford taken to producing the Fordson tractor. Yeah. And they said, wow, this is so amazing that we are not losing that much production by using the tractor.
Yeah.
When we go out, when we come in at night and we turn the tractor off, it doesn't use any more fuel.
Right.
When we park it for the winter, it doesn't use any more fuel.
At all, yeah.
And everything. And we don't have to take care of it. We don't have to shoe it. We don't have to do all these things. And tractors were so much better than everything else.
Right. So, yeah, and of course you really could tie that into that whole mechanization / industrialization.
Well, during World War II especially is there was so many advancements made during World War II because there was so shortage of men. For instance, one thing that made a big change, it wasn't so much here, but it was especially in the Midwest, was the advent of the combines.
Yes.
Was that all of a sudden you didn't have to have a crew shocking grain and throwing grain into a threshing machine. It did it for you.
Right. Yeah. I have to interject real quick. I was just over at the Clark County, not courthouse, the main office, the main council meeting room, and they have a beautiful picture up there of Clark County and a stationary thresher. The thing that I would encourage everybody to do, and next time you see a picture of a stationary threshing crew, count the number of people.
9 depended upon 9 to 13.
Right.
Yeah.
And I want to I'll just throw
depending
this
on
out.
how many kids you had hauling water.
Exactly. I'll throw this out there is that let's just speculate that if they were doing a great job, they could maybe harvest, let's say, 5 acres of grain a day.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah.
And you had to have people that were cutting the grain with a scythe and then shocking it and then
by
loading
that time
a wagon.
it was all McCormick Reaper.
With what's called a binder. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Anyhow, we were a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago now, they were harvesting. We were watching some YouTube creators out of central Montana, Shelby, Montana.
Yeah.
They were harvesting grain at a rate of, 32 acres an hour?
Yeah.
They were using a 61-foot wide head on a combine and harvesting it. I want to say it was like 31 acres per hour.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay, so if we're going to get through this, we're going to have to talk a little faster.
Yeah, let's just jump. Tell you what, we're pretty well done.
You talk every other word, and I'll,
go.
that way then you go twice as fast.
There you go. We're pretty well done. Let's take us up to, I just want to put this in perspective, your high school experience with FFA. You graduated high school from Battleground High School in 1971. I'll remember to use small words and speak really slowly.
So I want to hit on one thing,
yes,
and that is for Clark County, that was in between there.
Oh, okay.
Is the Columbus Day windstorm.
Oh, God, yes.
And people don't realize how much damage was done by the Columbus Day windstorm here. And I mean, there was a whole book written about it and showed pictures of it. Thousands of head of cattle were killed by the barns collapsing on the cattle.
Yep.
And sadly enough, I remember pictures of them and the cattle, under the barns and stuff. That really, the small farms that, we're still doing the bucket milkers and everything, that put a lot of them out of business.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm grinning because all I can think of is, it's because they were exempt from building permits.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, we've got a
and
thing going on.
they did have some very poor buildings. Yeah, built.
There was a handful of
so
those,
that did influence some of that and one thing and another. Yeah. The Columbus Day windstorm, and then getting into the 70s. What did you want to know about the 70s?
Okay, well, first of all, there was this little thing going on in East Asia.
Oh yeah, the start of the Vietnam War.
Folks, I watched a documentary a number of years ago, Ken Burns' documentary about Vietnam, and I never realized going through your going through your experience in high school, you were right in the thick of it. There was first of all Vietnam itself, and then there was Tet, and then there was the Kent State shooting, the not the My Lai massacre, but it was the My Lai court martial.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in that was not just JFK, but then RFK and MLK and
Martin Luther King,
all of the demonstrations and stuff. And then you graduated high school in 71.
Yeah. And several of my friends ended up going to Vietnam.
Yes. Yeah.
And stuff, and stuff. Anyhow, so we're coming up into the 70s here, and we're coming to kind of the end of this deal here. I think there's a couple of things we should touch on before we end up going into the next segment. Okay, number one was the change of presidency. We had Richard Nixon came in.
Yes.
He brought with him a Secretary of Agriculture named Earl Butz.
Yes.
And Earl Butz he had been president of the
Purdue University.
Purdue University, I believe it was.
Yep.
And anyhow, he came in with a whole new deal of you're going to farm fence row to fence row.
And he was an ag economist.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, which by the way, another good Kansas farm boy, Dwight Eisenhower, had a saying: "Folks, farming is easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from a cornfield."
I always thought Eisenhower had the best.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, that's not to say that Earl Butz didn't know anything, but he really kind of touted himself as I'm this ag economist and I can fix all your problems.
Yeah. So going back, if we can go back to about 1960, I was a small boy at that time, and I remember my dad coming in. We were coming in to wash up for stuff, wash up for lunch, and Dad was lamenting the fact that he needed a truckload of wheat to feed the chickens.
Yes.
That we had. We were mainly chickens and everything. But like Joe said, we had chickens, we had pigs, we had everything. Anyhow, chickens. And as a kid, I looked at Dad and I go, but gee whiz, Dad, you've got all this acreage that's sitting here. Why don't you raise a crop of wheat?
Yeah.
And Dad said, Bill, you don't understand. We don't have a wheat base.
Yes.
And I can't grow wheat if I want to, because the government has a program of a wheat base, and that way then it controls the price of wheat and keeps it where they feel it should be.
They were essentially controlling price by controlling supply.
Right.
And there were a handful of crops. Today we talk about the big six: wheat, corn, soy, rice, cotton, and canola.
Okay. Well, you got to rattle that off a little bit better.
But back then there was a handful of other things to include things like tobacco and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they would actually.
We didn't grow much here.
No, we didn't grow any tobacco here. Anyways, they would actually put caps on how much could be grown in hopes of, not in hopes, they physically controlled the price on
and
wheat.
Milk. Okay, so we're talking about the dairy industry. Milk was one of those.
Yes.
And even way into, gosh, I don't know when they finally stopped the, they have what's called the, I knew I should have written it down, the Federal Milk Marketing Order.
Yes.
And anyhow, is the feds will set the price of milk going to the farmers. Now, and for those of you that are not aware, but they did not set the price at what it goes in the grocery store for.
Yeah.
And at one time, we had quite a dysfunctional system where the farmers were going broke because the federal government was dropping the price of milk. However, they kept going back and going, well, the price of milk in the stores is astronomical.
Yeah.
And so the distributor, the processor, the retailer, everybody was making great money on the milk.
Yeah, except the farmer. But the government kept looking at it going, there's an excess of milk.
Yeah. People weren't buying as much milk because the price was so high. So if the price is that high, then the government keeps knocking the price down to the farmer.
But they didn't control it at the retail end. They controlled it
only at the farm end.
The farm end, yeah.
And I remember those years. There was a number of years there that, holy cow, they just, the dairymen were just scrambling.
Which, by the way, is a great segue into what we wanted to finish up with on this part was the beef price freeze.
Right.
Because it was very similar the same way. So why don't you lead us into kind of the handful of variables that got us to essentially, don't want to give away the punchline here, but runaway prices on the, I say beef industry. The reality is actually it was all, I believe it was all proteins.
I don't know.
Chicken.
Beef was the one that was really controlled.
Of course.
Yeah. And so what we ended up with was, okay, we had the ranchers had a very small calf crop.
Yes.
Very few cattle went onto feed.
Yes.
So it was a shortage of feeds animals. It was a shortage then of animals to go to slaughter, and it was a shortage of beef or meat in the store.
Yes.
And as a result, the price of meat just skyrocketed.
Right. Was this predated by a dip in price?
Well, most of the time it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course,
I can't remember going back into the 60s.
Yeah.
I don't remember now what the price had done.
Was, yeah. And of course, for those who don't know, what I'm getting at is when the price goes down, the farmers, kind of obviously they just go, well, if they're not going to pay me for cows, I'm not going to raise any cows. And so, so your crop is, you raise less babies.
Yeah.
That then are going to be, fewer to go to slaughter. There also was a handful of variables from overseas pressures as well, wasn't there?
I don't, if you're saying that, you know more than I do.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I was under the impression that it had to do with some droughts in overseas markets.
It could very well be. Argentina is one of the largest growers of beef besides the United States.
Yeah.
And so it could be that there was something there along that way.
Yeah, I do believe that there were, that I had read that there were a handful of other variables, whether, that there was other markets that, and then of course the other problem is, going back to what we've talked about commodity prices, is it also aligned with a huge jump in commodity prices for the feed that's then going to go to the cows.
Right, yeah.
And so
they opened up a whole lot of markets, foreign markets, and stuff. Yeah,
and so all of a sudden the feed commodities skyrocketed in prices, and of course the cattle growers.
That was fine as long as the cattle growers were doing good.
Right.
And what happened, sadly enough, and this led to, a lot of people are kind of sitting there going, well, why do we have these big the big producers? Why do we have these IB feet after whatever it is, and stuff, Cargill and different ones. Well, out of this beef price freeze came the fact that a lot of farms, they felt froze out. They wanted to hang on to their beef because everybody was positive that when this quit, when the beef price freeze came off, the price was going to jump. It was going to jump even higher. So here's what happened was that everybody held on to a lot of beef.
Which, of course, in a free market, would just make the price continue to climb.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it did.
Yeah.
It did. But here's the problem that happened. Okay, they were looking for beef to be about 1,000 pounds per animal.
Right.
Okay, and with that, they knew how many pounds of meat would be produced.
Right.
Okay, well, they hung on to the animals, and instead of having a 1,000-pound animal, now they had a 1,300-pound animal.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they started dumping these animals on the market, and they were 1,300 pounds or whatever, and all of a sudden there was just an absolute glut of animals on the market, and the price fell through the bottom.
Right.
And so many of the small farm feeders that were normally feeding, like I remember a friend of mine in the Army, his dad raised 32 head. Every year he fed 32 head of line back Herefords. They had to be line back Herefords to be, and stuff. And anyhow, went bankrupt.
Yeah.
And everything, because all of a sudden, he was counting on so much money coming in from those animals, and they were
worthless.
They were worthless. Yeah.
By the way, you and I've kind of tossed this ball back and forth before about what happened during the beef price freeze and stuff, and I always felt that, darn it, there's a variable I'm missing here, and then finally it dawned on me. It finally clicked. And here's what I want the folks listening to know about. Okay, it dawned on me. Let's say you have 100 head of cows. That's just an easy number to work with. those 100 cows, and of course, by definition, a cow is a female, and every year she has a baby.
Not
and
every year, but I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, one would hope. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
most people don't realize, yeah.
but 100 cows produce 100 babies, okay? There's another variable in there, just so you guys know behind the scenes, is that, of course, you're going to be rotating out
Maybe 10%.
10%. So every year that you birth 100 baby calves, 90 of them are going to go to the market, as well as 10 older cows to keep that turn going. Okay, and that's how that number goes. The catch is that as that price per head starts climbing and climbing very rapidly in about you said this was about 1970, 71, 72?
72, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That as the price starts climbing very rapidly, what I can envision in my mind is all of a sudden those cattle producers are going to start saying, well, heck, instead of selling 90 or instead of selling 100 this year, I'm only going to sell 80 because I'm going to grow my herd. Now I'm going to really cash in.
Well, and that's...
And of course, what that means is now you only have 80% of what was the standard demand for beef. Only 80% are going to market instead of 100. Yeah.
And you're primarily talking about the cow-calf ranchers.
Right.
And one thing and another. They started in looking at that too. That was an integral part of it, was that they wanted to increase their herd.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what you get is almost a, what do they call it, exponential growth in price. And
because that much shortage.
Yeah. Now, I'll go ahead and ask, how much beef did you guys buy in the grocery store in the 70s?
Never.
No. Of course, that was shall we say
we always had our own beef, besides the hogs or chickens or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, we had our own beef. Yeah.
That was something, and I can't remember. I think I asked Mom here the other day. It was, hey, tell me about the beef price freeze. What did it do to the price of beef? And Mom goes, I don't know. We never bought any beef.
Yeah.
But it did. It really hurt. In particular, the little farmers here.
Yeah, they didn't have financially enough. They
couldn't weather it.
Yeah, they couldn't weather it and everything. Where you have the big guys, Cargill and those, they're big enough that it's just another little piece on their balance sheet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then the other thing is, I can imagine. Okay, historically here in Clark County, at least I envision this, is that the folks that raised a lot of cattle were the folks that was their, shall we call it, supplemental income. In other words, that maybe they had that job in town at the shipyard, and then they raised cows on the side. Well, if all of a sudden your supplemental income becomes not a supplemental income, but a supplemental expense.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden you're like, well, the heck with this. I'm going to get rid of this piece of property and the cows and everything.
Yeah.
And of course, what I'm saying is, in comparison to those farmers we've talked about this whole time, is the ones that were diversified and they did multiple different things. Yeah. So, folks, that kind of takes us up through the end of the beef price freeze.
Maybe we should explain a little bit too.
No,
on the beef price freeze.
Okay.
And I traveled to Washington D.C. a number of years ago, and I came away with a kind of a mantra that I felt really fitted, and that was that cheap food buys votes.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, when this started happening, Richard Nixon was looking at it and going, I want the votes.
Yeah.
And if I allow beef to get too high in price, I and the Republican Party are gonna lose votes.
Right.
And so that precipitated why they did this, why they froze the price of beef and stuff. Yeah. And so
now,
sadly enough, it caused way more problems than they expected.
Right. And by the way, as we get into the second and the third part of this, we're going to see this kind of come around again and again, a bit of this, as you said, cheap food buys votes.
They want to manipulate it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, okay, question for you. Is this a Republican-only issue?
Oh, I don't think so.
No.
No. Well, we'll get into it later and stuff. But
and of course,
it is across the board.
It is across.
Cheap food buys votes. Yeah. Or you can also put it. Michael Pollan has a real good retort to it. Is that the United States doesn't have a cheap food policy, or doesn't have a good food policy.
Right.
They have a policy of cheap food.
Cheap food. No, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So
they will do, for the people, we'll kind of give you a little lead into it, is they will do what they can
yes.
to make sure that food is cheap.
Yes.
And if it's on the backs of the farmers, that's all right. Because, by golly, you know what? We can always bring food in from someplace else. Yeah.
And of course, when we get into part 2, I tell you what, it's going to, let's just say, I'll tell you folks right now, when we get into part 2 here, you will shed some tears about some stories.
Oh, I don't know if they will or not.
Oh, sure. I think they will. We're great storytellers. Right. But no, the thing I was getting at is, I don't see it as a Republican or Democrat issue. I am certain of it that, that you will see that it doesn't matter the party, that the lawmakers in this nation are really wanting to leverage food cost
and
for the people. I'm sure they'll term it as, well, I'm doing this for the people.
Yeah. So I will let people know is that I to this day cannot sit and watch a program on the farm crisis of 1980, and that's where we will get into next on the deal. I can't watch it.
Yeah.
I lived through it.
Yeah.
And I heard about all the people committing suicide and one thing and another that were losing their farms and one thing and another.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because
it was tragic. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, thank you for holding on. Now we're going to answer a couple of questions, but I want to let you know we're done. Oh, okay. Okay. Our director has now told us that I guess there are no questions. Folks, I tell you what, you got about 30 seconds here. If you have a question you want to ask, shoot it down in the comments down below. And by the way, before we let you guys go here, I do want to thank you. I am using, just so you guys know, I'm using my YouTube channel to show this live stream. If you guys want to, feel free to look through the videos that I have on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Your Local Farmer. And just so that you guys know, someone keeps me too busy here on the farm, and I haven't posted a video in about 1.5 years now. So
well, that's why probably you don't have any viewers anymore.
That's right. Probably not. Probably not. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for letting us present this to you. And please, probably in 2 weeks, we will come back with part 2, and then we will do part 3 after that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day, and come see us sometime.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.